Hey everybody, this is Mitch Ferraro from F Street. I'm the investor relations manager here, and today we're going to be talking everything private debt fund. And I wanted to get our lending manager, Steve Traub, on today. He is boots on the ground for the front end of our business, where we loan all of the money out of the private debt fund. It loans out of our hard money lending business. And Steve's going to be able to talk to us today a lot about what they do to make sure that when we loan that money out, that we're doing it correctly and we're doing it the right way to make sure that our investors' money is safe and we're making the right loans when we loan out that money. Steve, I really, really appreciate the time today. Thank you so much. I just want to just dive right into this.
Yeah.
Give me some understanding of what the lending side of the business does to make sure that when we loan that money out, those
Yeah.
investors that are investing with us, they can feel confident that we're giving out that money, we're loaning out that money
Yeah.
correctly.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Mitch.
Yep.
Always a pleasure, man.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
good to sit down and kind of go over what we do. So, I guess I'm just gonna kind of go over it from like a 30,000 foot view, we'll call it, and then
Perfect.
happy to dive into it a little bit more with you.
Yeah.
So, first things first is we obviously, we check on the property themselves and the LLC, right? It's kind of a two-step process. So, our main goal is to make sure that that property valuation is where we need it to be. We lend up to 65% of whatever the after repaired value is, as you know. So one of the things that sets us apart actually is the fact that we do in-house property valuations.
Yep.
So, I mean, you know, our property valuation team here, we do everything because we want to be comfortable with the money we lend. We know what our kind of appetite for certain comp pockets is, that sort of thing.
Yep.
So we're checking, like I said, that property value. We're checking the client's assets to make sure, hey, you need $40,000 to close. Great. In addition to that, how are you going to make payments to us every month, right?
Yep.
So we're
Yep.
double checking to make sure that we're setting them up for success there.
Yep.
When it comes to, the client themselves, kind of as like an individual,
Yeah.
we are getting a copy of their credit from them. Credit's a snapshot in time. So I'm a personal believer, like, while credit is important, it does let you know, hey, Mitch is paying his bills on time each
Right.
month, right?
Right.
It's also one of those things that if you extend a credit card as a contractor, which is a lot of our clients, hey, I have a Home Depot card with a $10,000 limit. I just put 10K on it because I
Sure.
had to get materials. My credit is 30 points below where it normally is.
Right.
So I think
Right.
it's important to kind of keep that in mind.
Yep.
And then one of the biggest things for us, frankly, is experience,
Yeah.
right? Have you been successful before? How were you successful? And are we setting you up to be successful on this project?
Yep.
So when it comes to experience, we'll ask them for things like before and after photos. We want to make sure, the client is the one that's doing good work, frankly. This property is likely going to move. There's not going to be a lot of issues with it. So we're going to get those before and after photos. We're going to get an idea of, okay, you just flipped 101 Main Street. How much was that property? How much were your renovations? How quickly did it turn around, right?
Yep.
Our loan term itself is for 6 months. We want to, again, make sure that client is being set up for success. Can you get this project done in 6 months?
Right.
Show me you've done it before,
Yep.
right? So we're, really running them through a lot of kind of the property stuff, the personal stuff, including a background check. So we want to make sure, hey, there's not an outstanding lien that could come into first lien position, any issues like that.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And I think what you touched on right away about doing everything in house. So we have our loan
Yep.
originators, our property evaluators, our underwriters. We
Yep.
all are working as a team to get all this information that you're talking about, the background checks, the
Hmm.
the bank account information, getting their experience, make sure the property's evaluated the correct way. And you talk about experience being a big indicator of
Yeah.
us loaning out to individuals. Not saying that we don't loan out to newer
Yeah.
investors as well, because we do, but tell us a little bit about how do we, generate those applications to come in so that we have a good steady flow of
Sure.
deals that we're underwriting.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like there's a couple different avenues that we go about it, right? We've got a very large kind of repeat borrower list.
Yep.
So we are actively reaching out to those borrowers. We want to help people scale in time.
Sure.
We want to be their lender for life.
Yep.
So we really try to cater to those returning borrowers and do our best to bring in as much business from them as possible because they have been successful.
Yep.
And if they had, maybe they needed 7 months on a project, but hey, we worked with them, they paid their extension fee or whatever it is. We obviously like to work with those.
Yeah.
And then some of the other leads are We generate some leads from Google. We obviously generate leads from our referral partners. Hey, Mitch, you helped, Scott on a deal,
Yep.
right? Is there anybody else that that we can help? So
Yeah.
we do try to reach out, to referral partners as well. And then we do just do some basic advertising because we do some deals that are a little bit outside of the box. And
Yep.
we want to make sure, like you said, to kind of cater to beginners, which a lot of those people are using online sources, frankly, to find us.
Right, right. One of the biggest things that I always looked at when I was flipping homes was that like there were two big numbers that I could never get wrong. One was the after repair value,
Hmm.
what the home's going to be worth once it's all fixed up,
Yep.
and also the repairs. I
Yeah.
had to make sure that the repairs were on point where I'm saying, hey, this is going to cost
Yeah.
$25,000 when actually it's a full remodel of a home, which is
Hmm.
really going to cost like $75,000,
Yep.
which if you get that number wrong, you're basically botching all your profit.
That's
So
true.
talk to us a little bit about how, when borrowers are coming in and providing us this information that
Yeah.
they feel is
Yeah.
what the after repair value is or what the repairs number are, what are
Sure.
we doing to make sure that we are in line? And if not in line,
Yeah.
what do we do to go back to that borrower
Sure.
and say, hey, you know what? We're just not jiving with the same numbers.
That's a really good question. The first thing that we ask them to do is to fill out a scope of work for us. I don't want to know that your flip is 25 grand. I want to know where is your 25 grand going, right?
Right. Yes.
So we get active photos from that client as well. So when you're buying 101 Main Street, I want to see photos like what is the current condition?
Yep.
Hey, I see a step crack in the basement wall. I don't see foundation addressed at all on your scope of work.
Sure.
What's your plan to deal with this?
Yep.
Right. And if the scope of work, kind of twofold, but the scope of work, we feel like it's like, hey, you're paying 30 grand for a roof. Can you get us a quote to show us
Sure.
why it's $30,000?
Right.
Right. So we want to make sure that they're spending that money. We don't want to be a big brother, but we want to make sure they're spending that
Yep.
money like wisely and they're not getting taken advantage of,
Right.
especially the new beginners.
Right.
So we're gonna go through that, and then if they are a beginner and they're using a general contractor and they have a question,
Yep.
we'll help them sometimes do some background research on that general contractor and make sure, hey, there isn't something that came up that you may want to address ahead of, jumping into a project with them.
Yep. Yep.
And then I think the other thing, and likely the most important thing, as you know, I mean, you did some flips, right? Stuff
Yep.
comes up.
Yep.
So we try to encourage people to build in a contingency
Yep.
budget to their scope of work. So if your project is 50 grand for repairs, like let's make it 55. Let's give you 5 grand. Worst case, you don't use it, great. It comes right off your payoff, but at least you have that. So we are setting you up for success moving forward.
Building that scope of work and looking at it, and you talk about a house or a roof being $30,000, or they're going to pay $10,000 for a little paint in a room or something like that. It's almost like we're working with them as a team to make sure that their scope of work is correct, their after repair
Yeah.
value is correct. Obviously seeing what they're going to be purchasing the property for, all of these things.
Yeah.
How much communication are you having with a borrower during the time of, we close on a loan and now they're going through the process and now they're going to sell the house or refinance the house? Who's communicating with them? What does that look like for us as a team and how we're working with those borrowers directly?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, I just want to go back to one thing that you said. Like our view on our side is this is a partnership. I don't want to set anybody up with a loan that isn't going to be able to get accomplished. And if it is something that, there's questions on, like we really try to do our due diligence. Hey, I'm turning a 2-family into a single family. Okay. Have you talked to the city about that yet? Right. So we are communicating with them throughout the process. Post closing,
Yep.
they're obviously working with our draw team. I mean, Kayla, right? She's
Yeah.
fantastic. But that scope of work, they're going to be submitting draw requests to us throughout the process. So, she's frankly communicating with them. I would say, just say the average project has 5 draws, just for the sake of our kind of point here.
Yeah.
She's communicating with them likely once per month
Sure.
from month 1 through, month 6,
Yep.
essentially, once they pay us off.
Yep.
They're making payments to our accounting department. And then just strictly on like the loan officer side, I follow up with these clients monthly.
Yep.
I want to check in on their project, make sure they don't have any questions. If they, had something come up, hey, I had a $5,000 contingency, I needed to replace a beam, it was 3 grand. What do I do?
Yep.
Right. So I want to make sure we're like helping them continue along with the
Yeah.
steps so they're not
Yeah.
lost. And then Some clients, frankly, keep these properties as rentals, right? And
Sure.
they refinance out. So we have a quick conversation. We by no means do any type of those financing here, but we do certainly have referral partners
Yep.
that we know and trust that have followed through for previous clients of ours before. So we do want to get that information over to them as well in
Yep.
case that is their end goal.
Yeah.
What we find a lot of times is as a project moves on, the market changes, especially in Wisconsin, right?
Sure.
So if the market is maybe rentals are really high in demand, their priority of what they were planning to do may change through the
Sure.
process.
Sure.
So we want to make sure that if it does change, we're communicating with them and getting ahead of that as best as we can.
Yeah. And I think a perfect example that you could talk about that, like, hey, all of a sudden this borrower is going to move into a rental mode versus a flip mode where they're
Mhm.
going to be refinancing the property out. And hey, you know what? Instead of putting granite countertops inside the kitchen, we're going to
Yeah.
do laminate and save ourselves a few $1,000s because that's a big change. And having that communication with them on what's going on is, I feel like, very, very important. And I agree too. Kayla doing all those draw requests, that's awesome. And I know we use a really cool piece of technology
Mhm.
to make sure, called True Pics, to
Yeah.
make sure that the pictures that borrower is taking is of that actual asset, that actual property that we're borrowing
Yeah.
out on. So I know that there's a lot of really good communication that's going on.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about, because listen, right? We're in the lending business. We know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some harder case scenarios where, hey, you know what? Borrowers are not able to make their payments each month, or we have to, use that first lien position to foreclose on a property.
Sure.
Let's talk about that a little bit so that investors get an understanding of, we do all of this in house. Like, we're
Yeah.
making sure that we can do this and are along the whole process, even if it gets in kind of a bad
Mhm.
shape.
Yeah. I think, even throughout the process, we want to maintain that communication. I think it's important to understand that, everyone wants to be successful. At the end of the day, it doesn't work out. More often than not, those are the clients that maybe didn't build in a contingency or didn't, maybe they're using a general contractor. They just didn't go and look at the background stuff. I'll just give you a live example. We had a client who got an initial draw,
Yep.
right? Paid the contractor, not even a large initial draw. It was $6,000 of
Yep.
a roughly $70,000 project.
Yep.
So he had given a contractor money. The contractor just up and disappeared.
Yep.
And didn't do our research, and it sets you back, right?
Yep.
So having that contingency budget in that case is important. It's like, oh shoot, this happened.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and flip this money. Let's start over, right? Not everybody takes that initiative, but we do want to maintain communication. If you can't make payments at the end of the day,
Yep.
if you have a contingency budget, for example, we could maybe take one payment out of that contingency budget. We had done a loan here, and a client was in a situation where she had gotten really sick, like post closing,
Yeah.
and had surgery and was in the hospital, and was just like, I'm not bringing in the money that I want. My project is behind. We're able to kind of use that contingency budget to kind of towards her extension fee, frankly, to avoid the foreclosure. We don't want to go that route,
Right.
right?
Right.
If it does happen, we want to help kind of make that process as smooth as possible, not only for us, but for that client. Hey, it didn't work out. We understand. Maybe we have another investor who could take on your project, and maybe we look at doing like a short sale or something like that.
Sure.
Or, I know your contractor said it's 70 grand. This contractor can do it for 50 because he does it himself.
Yep.
Maybe we try to like fluctuate or kind of, flip it around there.
Yeah.
The point of this, Mitch, is that we try to exhaust all options. I don't want to, never want someone to get foreclosed on. At the end of the day, if they don't communicate with us, it's a different situation.
Right.
But at least we're trying to help them through whatever hurdles they have.
Yeah, I feel like, and it's one of the nice things about being in the office all together. We get to hear and be a part of all these different
Yeah.
things that are going on in the office, whether it's on the hard money side or on the private debt fund side or on the equity side. And I think one of the biggest things that I've always noticed about our office is that we're all just trying to make a solution. If there is a problem, we're
Yeah.
trying to come together and help to make sure that we can move forward in a positive note. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've seen about F Street in my time here is, like, at the end of the day, you're right. We don't want to foreclose on the asset. We want it to be win-win situations
Yeah.
for everybody. But in the instance that does have to happen because a borrower doesn't communicate or whatever it might be, the investor's money is protected with us being in that first lien position and being able
Correct.
to do that if
Yep.
it's the worst case scenario that we need to be able to do that. I think that's extremely important for
Mhm.
investors to understand, because at the end of the day, we do have some collateral that we can take over to recoup on that
I
investment.
I mean, a hard asset, right?
Yep.
Like, you're physically looking at it.
Yep.
And I would say that those cases are very low,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we certainly have people extend. We certainly have people that, periodically will take a payment out of that draw account. But
Yep.
at the end of the day, we're going to exhaust all options to make sure that that money is paid back. We don't want to take on the asset, but
Yep.
if it happens, it happens.
Yeah.
Like, because we do then take those properties, they are an investor lift. We do sell them oftentimes to like investors who have performed very well.
Yep.
Like here in Milwaukee, I know we have a few investors that we, are like, hey, we have this property that's going to be coming on.
Right.
It's coming back to us, whatever the situation is.
Yep.
Is this something you'd want to take on?
Right.
Right. And those are investors that have proven themselves time and time and time again,
Yep.
have crews of them, of theirs, and have likely done 5+ deals with us.
Sure.
So,
Sure. So, we're talking about, these things that happen where we might have to go into foreclosure on an
Yeah.
asset, take an asset over.
Sure.
One of the really nice things that I think about what F Street has built over the past 16 years of being in this business is we've really built a really good resource of investors and borrowers that if we have to go into foreclosure and we take that asset over, we can sell it to our network of investors and get that property off our books right away. Why don't you just touch on a little bit
Yeah.
on how we go through that process and how we use our network to to be able to sell assets that we might have to take over
Yeah.
through foreclosure?
I think, and we touched on this just a little bit earlier regarding kind of like call it scope of work and total bills to be able to get these items done. But we have quite an extensive list of investors,
Yeah.
that have done 5+ deals with us. So when we have just say we have a new foreclosure in Milwaukee for, $100,000, like
Yep.
we'll ask them, are you looking for your next project? A
Yep.
lot of times the answer is yes,
Yep.
because the market, especially the investor market, is very competitive. And so there are like wholesalers calling the sellers.
Yep.
There are countless flippers like putting in offers on a lot of these properties.
Yep.
So we really try to cater to our repeat clients. It's, hey, you've proven yourself. You've got a badass crew that gets this stuff done,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
You've performed extremely well. Are you interested in your next project? Yes or no? Here's a
Yep.
little bit more of detail about it. Keep in mind, Mitch, we already have at that point an updated idea of what the property's worth after those
Right.
renovations are completed.
Right.
We have an idea of what the current condition is.
Yep.
So like we really have a lot of the determining factors that we would need in order to be able to close the loan. So we close those quickly and those perform extremely well.
Yeah, so it's almost like a smoke and deal most of the times when we can be able to sell that property to another investor
Yeah.
because we have a really good understanding of what's going on in that deal, and we can use our network to be
Yep.
able to say, does this make sense for you at this time? Because
Yeah.
timing is everything on these deals.
100%.
I mean, you have to be at the right if it is a returning borrower, they have to make sure that their workload is correct as well, and they have the contractors be able to do the work. So
Yeah.
I think it's great that we can use that network to be able to offload assets if we have to go ahead and foreclose on them.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that, we do have some people that are doing 2 or 3 projects at a time. So if we can get an opportunity to set them up for success, help them out.
Yeah.
Why not?
So, a lot of times too, what we'll do is we'll have I'll even have like investors that want to come into the private debt fund and say, hey, you know what? I see that you're paying 50, your borrowers are paying 15% in 5 points.
Yeah.
Why would they even come to you? Why aren't they going and getting traditional lending on these properties versus coming and paying such a high interest on this money to borrow?
Yeah. I think that's a really good question, right? There's a few different reasons. One, speed. Traditional lender, I come from traditional lending, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit on my soapbox here, but traditional lending, you're 30 to 45 days to close.
Yep.
If I'm competing against you and you have traditional lending and I have traditional lending, what's my upper hand, right?
Yep.
You have traditional lending, I'm using the hard money code. It's like, you want to close Monday of next week? Is that quick? Yes. Like, I'll see you Monday of next week.
Yeah.
So it's just purely speed, scalability. And then, we allow a client, like as they've proven themselves, right?
Yep.
If they have $100,000,
Yep.
maybe we do it for 10% down. We lend them the repair funds. If they go to a traditional lender, they're doing minimum 20% down,
Yep.
and their repair funds are coming out of their own pocket.
Yep.
Where's the scalability in that?
Right.
Right. And then the third thing is just purely like the red tape.
Yeah.
You're using a third party appraiser. Like, what if that appraisal is late?
Yep.
Is the property currently rented out? If the answer is no, then you have no current rental income to use. I hope you want to give them your tax returns, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
a lot of our clients, frankly, are self-employed. Like,
Yep.
their tax returns may not reflect all of the income that they carry month to month
Right.
because they're going to have, write-offs for new equipment or whatever they're buying. So, it's just a lot of like clients just come to us for one of those three reasons.
Yep.
The other reason that they would come to us is strictly for like the knowledge,
Yep.
right? If they go to say a traditional lender doesn't know a lot about fix and flips, right? Like, are they going to be able to say, hey, you should go and finish this base and put it in a egress window? You're going to add 1,200 square feet. You just made 70 grand. How do you feel?
Right.
They're like, what are you doing with the project? I don't care.
Yep.
I'm just going to give you the money you need to buy the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think another big point too is that,
yeah.
the traditional lender sometimes they may look at that asset and be like, we're not touching that thing.
Yeah.
This thing's in bad shape. You've got
Yeah.
electrical issues, plumbing issues, hole in the roof,
Yep.
foundation issues. Lender's going to say,
Yeah.
I'm not even touching this property.
Yeah. There's on an appraisal report, there's a condition, right? It's C1 through C4. C4 is we won't lend on it. A lot of the properties that like, oh, you're missing soffits, there's a hole in the roof.
Yep.
That's a C4. Fannie and Freddie won't touch them.
Yep.
So,
yeah, I think that's a very important, like, not only will they not touch it, but then like what you were mentioning too, like now we'll also give you the funds to fix
Yeah.
up the property as well, which a traditional lender is not going to be doing that also. One thing I want to touch on before we get out of
Yeah.
here is let's just talk a little bit about volume, right?
Sure.
Let's talk about, we kind of talked about applications coming in and how we get those in.
Yeah.
But, talk a little bit about, how many active loans do we have typically at any given point in time? How
Sure.
are we doing this year? How do you see growth
Yeah.
for us this year? Just touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. That's a really loaded question,
Yeah.
but I'm happy to. So our volume is frankly been pretty good the last 4 or 5 months. I think or the volume's been great. I shouldn't even say that. Our volume has been growing the last 4 or 5 months. I think part of the reason is in our space, hard money is like a lot of times, that hard money is hard to obtain.
Mm-hmm.
And as time goes on and inflation goes up and everything else, and we want to get into that,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people that are doing hard money on the lending side are starting to tighten up some of their expectations or qualifications. Like, we're not going to lend in Illinois. It's like, that's a pretty bold thing to do,
Yeah,
but
right.
you're not going to lend in certain states now. So I think as time goes on, our volume is going to do nothing but increase.
Yeah.
From an application perspective, I'd say we get 350 to 400 applications a month.
Yep.
We're closing between 30 and 45 loans a month.
Yep.
Our average volume, I think the last 2 months for just purely like dollars we lent out,
Yeah.
was definitely north of 10 million a month. So, as time goes on, we are certainly growing. I feel like from my perspective, we're growing smart. Like,
Yep.
we are not lending in situations that put us into a potentially super rough spot.
Sure.
And if we end up getting into that spot long term, I won't come back and say, well, we didn't do our due diligence,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
I think as time goes on and we continue to lend, I don't see how we don't continue to just grow. And our goal, is we want to do 50 to 100 loans a month.
Yep.
That's our goal here in the next few months. So I would be surprised if we're not there by the end of June.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mitch, to touch on your point, about, kind of what we're doing and just growth in general, looking at some of the other large national lenders, I've watched some of the loans that they've lent on, frankly, and I feel like they were starting to loosen their guidelines. You don't need to bring any money to close. Don't worry about payments till you pay us off.
Sure.
So I think that they, at certain points, were making decisions that weren't as conservative as some of the decisions that we're making.
Yep.
However, those decisions that we're making allow us to grow not only smarter, but as they're starting to stop lending in certain states like Illinois, Michigan, Florida,
Yep.
we're going to start picking up some of those properties and some of that traction.
Yeah.
I think naturally. And those people and LLCs or whatever that we lend on in those states, like those are going to be very good performing clients of previous companies that are just no longer lending there.
Yeah. Yeah. I always love it. I've had an opportunity to sit down with the owner and founder, Scott Lurie. We all know Scott. He's big into the business. He's, very much boots on the ground himself. I love it because just the other day he said, in really good times, we do well.
Yeah.
In volatile times, in the hard market, we do even better. We see some of that right now in
Yeah.
these harder times because markets could be so volatile. Like, we're keeping our guidelines, we're keeping our underwriting
Yeah.
processes, and we're lending on a lot of good deals right now. We're seeing that volume there. So
Yeah.
it's great to see the growth. I do as well agree. I think our growth is going to be exponential,
Hmm.
over this next year, and it's super exciting to be a part
Yeah.
of. And I know we're going to do a great job as a team. But Steve, I just really want to appreciate you for your. I just want to say thank you for your time today. I
Yeah.
really, really appreciate it. Your knowledge is awesome, and again, your boots on the ground on the lending side.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear and get to talk to you
Absolutely.
about it. So thank you so much for the
Yeah,
time
man.
today.
Thanks for having me, and always a pleasure to talk about it, man. I love the Hard Money Co., and I'm excited to blow this thing up in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So if any of you, if you want to learn more information or need anything else, you can always check out our YouTube channel. Just search F Street on YouTube. You can also reach out to me if you'd like to learn more on the private debt fund side. You can reach me at mitch@fstreet.com. And Steve, you go ahead. You can give you all your contact
Yeah,
information.
I'm Steve Traub with the Hard Money Co. Feel free to reach out to us, thehardmoneyco.com. I know we've got Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all sorts of other ways you can reach us. So check out the podcast and feel free to reach out to me, Steve@fstreet.com, if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, guys. Hope
Thank
everyone
you.
has a great day.